Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. It's Wednesday, the 13th of September. Our guest in this first segment is Bill Geimer, and Bill is the author of Canada, The Case for Staying Out of Other People's Wars, which sounds like a good idea. So, Bill, I'll ask you first, why are you wearing the uniform?
Well, thank you for asking that, because I first want to point out that I was never much of a soldier, although I was a member of an elite U.S. Army unit. Unlike my father, who was a veteran of two wars, I was not much of a soldier. Whenever I talk about the book, I wear this uniform to remind me of the friends that I buried with full military honors during the Vietnam era. One in particular, Captain Gordon O. Walsh, who died senselessly in Vietnam. And that was in 1969, and my friends are dead, and I've gone on to a wonderful, blessed life, and that's why I carry on in organizations like the Vancouver Island Peace and Disarmament Network in their memory.
Can we just mention that the entire Vietnam War was based on a lie?
We certainly can.
Yeah.
And Canada's part in it is not as well known as it should be. If I can talk a moment about the book, because I want people to engage in a conversation about getting out of other people's wars and making our own decisions. The book's available, of course, online at Amazon. It's available through Chapters. It's available at Monroe, Tanner's in Sydney, or contact me. The book is a readable story of Canada's wars. It is not an academic history, although it is well researched, and no one argues with the facts in the book. What they argue with is the conclusions that I draw from the facts. So the message of the book is very simple. The story of Canada's wars tells us that it's urgent that Canadians have a rational conversation about getting free of U.S. military servitude and making our own decisions about our blood and treasure. Now, if we do that, we're not going to make always the decisions that I agree with, but it's especially now, given what's going on south of the border, we need to have that separation in our own talk, make our own decisions. And the story of Canada's war so far tells us that when a powerful patron calls, we go off to fight in somebody else's war, and then when it's over, we don't talk about it like we need to talk about it. And then when the next call comes, we just go again. And the story of Canada's wars tells us also that Canada did not come of age at Vimy. If she had, there would not have been Hong Kong, there would not have been Dieppe, there would not have been Afghanistan, which we had to trade off for managing mostly to stay out of Iraq, and we would not be literally fueling the air war that's killing civilians in the Middle East today. So I look forward to having people engage in conversation with me about that, and I'm very pleased that I'm going to be able to teach a continuing education course on Beyond Vimy, where does the story of Canada's wars take us, at the University of Victoria in November and December, and I hope people inquire about that. So that's the end of the commercial, Jack.
Okay, well,
that's about what the book is about.
It's a good commercial. You wanted to talk about recurring factors, things that keep happening.
Yeah, two of them in particular. The book, in the research for the book, from every war from 1899 until the present, factors keep coming up again that we don't talk about. There are war-promoting factors, and the two of them that are the one that is probably most important is the union of capitalism and imperialism, by whatever name you call them. Well, there may be a new name: big business, corporations, or national interest, or colonial, whatever you want to call it. The bargain is that when government needs violence, coercive force from big business, they get it, and vice versa. When big business needs force from government, they get it.
So they're working together.
That comes up every single war Canada's ever fought. The other major war promoting factor is the propaganda and the failure of journalism. And that is something else that goes throughout the book. There are a number of factors, again, they all recur in all wars, that should be war discouraging, except that they are drowned out or overcome by the war promoting factors. And chief among those is human rights violations and civilian deaths. I know Canadians don't want to be a part of the death of civilians, but we are. And horror and senseless military deaths and racism are all things that should give us pause before we sign on to the next war, but we don't. There is one example out of the many of the factors, because that killing of civilians is what motivates me. It motivated me primarily to write the book, and it's what sends me out every day to try to get people to have this conversation. There is no better example of that factor that needs to be talked about than Bomber Command in World War II. And I don't have time to give you the quotations and the pages here, but this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Despite a ministerial agreement to the contrary, Canadians were, long after the Statute of Westminster, were folded into the Royal Air Force and had no say about what the targets were going to be. And their own pilots and crew people were killed at a horrible rate in the murder of civilians. And there is absolutely no doubt that this was the policy of the British, because there is a clear statement by Sir Arthur Harris, the Air Marshal, spoken of in the book, that says, this is what we're doing. This is not a byproduct of bombing factories. We're out there to kill ordinary Germans. And he succeeded in killing 500,000 of them. And the way that was done, especially from the air and from afar, is also an example of the dissociation of morality and technology that began in the Great War that we tend to be commemorate so well. That is, even as horrible as war has been, there was a time when there were moral considerations. But now technology and morality have become so far apart that if you have the technology to do something, be it a drone or an atomic bomb or whatever, the question is no longer should we, it's if we can, we will, or we are ready to do it. And nothing is a better example of that, of Canada's lack of independence and participating in moral outrages at the behest of another powerful patron than Bomber Command. So.
I'll just throw in, it's interesting that right now, if there is a terror attack in, let's say, Germany, the government of Canada and the government of the United States and Britain are outraged by this horrible killing of 5 or 10 or 15 people by these terrorists. And yet not that long ago, we and the Americans and the British were killing Germans by the tens of thousands, and that was fine.
No one has the courage to say you can never, having committed to violence, and our adversary is committed to violence, you can never completely make everyone safe all the time. But we are manufacturing terrorists in the Middle East, and the threat is highly overblown. If I can, I want to, what I'm emphasizing these days, and what I hope we can talk about, is the chapters on Korea and Afghanistan, particularly in Afghanistan, show us from our past experience what the formula is for the U.S. drawing us into their adventures. And it's a three-part formula. First of all, step one is you play on what Canadians think they are, which is peacekeepers and humanitarians. That's how we got into Afghanistan. Jean Chrétien gave a speech and said, we're going over to Kandahar primarily to aid in humanitarian things. We certainly don't expect a big fight over there. Then the undue influence of the Department of National Defense and the generals on public policy drives the government in a bait and switch operation. And that's exactly what happened in Afghanistan. The Canadian generals drove us. The next thing you know, we're in the middle of combat in Kandahar, and other European nations have got the good sense to say, we ain't going there, we're limiting our fate. It was the US and Canada and the UK. That's step two of the thing, is the bait and switch. And of course, with the US, you also threaten and cajole. We didn't get completely into Iraq. We didn't sign on to the missile defense Star Wars thing. And so Finance Minister Bill Graham said, after those two things, the only flag we had to wave was Afghanistan. We were offside with the U.S. on everything else. So that is the formula. And it is being played out today in a perversion of peacekeeping language. For example, I heard the Secretary of for the Minister of National Defense say peacekeeping includes the military advisors to the forces in Iraq today. They are warrior diplomats. So they're changing the language as well as...
Peacekeeping includes...
Yeah, that's peacekeeping. That's warrior diplomats, those who are advising the military in Iraq. So I hope, finally, I thank you again for letting me talk a little bit. We need to have this talk. So I'm asking people, invite me to come and sit down with you and a few friends. It'll be very respectful. I'll listen to anything that anybody has to say. We need to have this talk. And if you show up at the class at UVic, that will all views will also be respectfully considered. We just need to have this talk.
Okay. When is the class again?
The class begins in the first week of November, and it's 10 to 12 on Saturdays.
Oh, okay. So it's open
for six sessions. The book is the text. Students will very easily find the counter argument, which will be welcome to be discussed. It's not going to be lectures. It's going to be problems, group sessions, role playing. We're going to explore these factors as they have played out in all of Canada's wars, and we'll do it in a very respectful
What's the class
manner.
called?
The class is called Beyond Vimy. Where should the story of Canada's wars lead us?
Okay. So if anybody wants to just contact UVic, which is very easy to do, they can find out all about the course.
Certainly, yeah, sure. That's actually continuingstudies.uvic.ca/beyond-vimy is what that's pretty long, but you can get the Continuing Studies Department at UVic. And
great.
And
I think we have 1 or 2 minutes left. Right. I'm not sure. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about Korea.
Korea was the thing that
the Korean War, I guess.
Yeah, I was in Japan in grade 5, and my father was there one moment, and then the next moment he was gone.
So he was in the Korean
perimeter.
War.
He was in that desperate defense of the Pusan perimeter. The thing that will bring Canadians up short, if you read the truth about Korea, is that, of course, we went along with the U.S., but this is where the latent racism that we all have a little bit of came out. Canadians committed war crimes. The Americans leveled every building above 2 stories in all of North Korea. And in fact, the Americans and mad General MacArthur, the atomic bomber wannabe, created North Korea. They drew an arbitrary line that put the best part of Korea in the American occupation zone and made the rest of it the North. So there's a lot that's relevant to today about the Korean chapter as well.
Bill, we're out of time. Thank you very much. It was very informative and entertaining.
Thank you so much, Jack. I appreciate it.
Everybody, you can think about taking the course, just contact UVic. And just read the name of the course again.
It is Beyond Vimy. Where should the story of Canada's wars lead us?
Okay. And thanks very much for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back to Citizens Forum. I guess this is segment 2. And we have with us today Adam Taylor. And Adam is the Executive Director of the Marmot Recovery Foundation right here on Vancouver Island. And welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you.
Now, we on occasion see clips in the news about the marmots and what's happening to them. And I'm just wondering, how is it that you got into working for and trying to preserve marmots in Vancouver Island?
I've been working with endangered species on Vancouver Island for a long time now. Prior to joining the Marmot Recovery Foundation, I was working with an organization called Habitat Acquisition Trust, which is a local land trust here in Victoria. And so I had the opportunity there to work with a number of species, western painted turtles and blue-gray tail dropper slugs, sharp-tailed snakes, and so a number of endangered species that lived in our urban and sort of rural areas. So when the opportunity came up, the previous executive director of the Marmot Recovery Foundation was retiring, and it looked to me like an opportunity to explore a part of the island that I had really never had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in, that subalpine and alpine world, and to work with a species that's really emblematic to this area. The Vancouver Island marmot, this is it. It lives here and nowhere else in the world. So it's ours to save or lose. And I really felt like it was a wonderful opportunity to play a part in that really local story.
So how does the Marmot Recovery Foundation sustain itself? You know, how do you operate in your ongoing businesses, and how do you get your funding for your testing and all that?
So our job is really to do the on the ground work to bring the marmot back from the brink of extinction. And we're funded primarily by donations from the public. We do get contributions from the provincial government, the federal government, and from some of the private landowners, but most of our money comes from the public. And that has been what has saved the marmot. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that there would not be a marmot for us to save if it weren't for people stepping up and making donations to let us do the work. It takes money to get the marmots out.
So how long has the foundation really been active?
We've been around for 19 years now.
Okay.
And so we started releasing, the very first marmots we released to the wild were in 2004. And so just over that past 10 years now, we've gone from 30 marmots in the wild to about 200 today. Now,
was there a time when you think perhaps there might have been as few as 30 marmots in the wild?
There were fewer than 30 marmots in the wild in 2003, yes.
Now, where were they located at, or where are they located at mostly?
So today there's two populations of them. There's an area around Nanaimo Lakes, Haley Ecological Reserve, Gemini, Green Mountain. And that is the spot where marmots actually remained back in 2003, where there were just 30 left. Most of them were concentrated there. There's another population that lives in Strathcona Park and Mount Washington, just outside the park. There were also a few marmots left at Mount Washington. They were beginning to show some really serious signs of inbreeding, so that was a big concern. And unfortunately, marmots had been completely extirpated from Strathcona Provincial Park back in 2003. So there were none left there.
Wow. But Nanaimo Lake, is that fairly low-lying?
No, this is subalpine habitat as well.
Oh, I see.
So no, you're just like me. I mean, when I spent my life working around the coast, you hear Nanaimo, you think, coastline. But this is alpine and subalpine, way up behind Nanaimo, up above Cowichan Lake, but fairly high elevation.
So now there's some recovery going on. Do you have, is the breeding happening in the wild or is it in captivity?
Well, both. So we do have a captive program, and we made that decision back in the early 2000s to pursue a captive program because it seemed to us to be the only way to guarantee that we could actually keep marmots going. They were disappearing from the wild so quickly that unless we brought a few into captivity, we really worried that we'd simply lose the population and they would be gone. And obviously it was very, very close.
So is it a habitat loss scenario? Is it a climate change situation, or what do you think is putting so much pressure on the marmots?
I think the marmots are a really good case study in how we can impact environments indirectly. So the core habitat where marmots live has never really been disturbed that much by humans. They live in these subalpine meadows, tree-free meadows that are kept tree-free by avalanches. We are beginning to see changes there as a result of climate change, but there's never been any logging. There's no trees to log there. The impacts from marmots really came from changes that occurred outside their core ecosystem. We started punching in roads. Those roads brought in extra predators that probably were fairly rare in the past in marmot ecosystems.
So that would be like a wolf could travel down the road faster and it could wander through the trees.
Exactly, and that's exactly what happens. Wolves can cover much larger distances, and they do use roads as highways to cover these really big distances and to get into these high altitude areas that otherwise would have been really hard for them to reach.
That's interesting.
We also saw that with logging in some of these high altitude areas, although they weren't logging marmot habitat, it was nearby. And two things happened. One, after the area was logged, deer and elk moved into there, and cougars and wolves followed them because that's their food source. So suddenly you've got cougars and wolves, again, very close to marmots. And unfortunately, marmots looked at those open areas and thought that they would be good homes. And so a lot of marmots that were leaving their core colonies dispersed into these clear cuts. But as soon as those areas began to regrow, the marmots could no longer see their predators, and the marmots are visual animals. They need to see it to be protected. So with shrubbery, they just became food for other animals very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I used to hike a lot in Alberta, and I used to see a lot of these ground squirrels, and used to be on these clear, open, like often high up in the mountain passes, often on the sunny side of the pass, you'd see these colonies. They're very numerous. It didn't look like they were endangered out there.
Ground squirrels are very numerous. They're not in any trouble. They're spreading rapidly, in fact. And there are a couple of other marmot species in BC, hoary marmots and yellow-bellied marmots. And neither of them are at risk. And yellow-bellied marmots in particular, we get regular offers from people to transport yellow-bellied marmots if we want them over here. We don't. We're happy with our Vancouver Island marmot. Thank you very much.
Now, what is it? We're down to 200 or so. What do you think we would lose if they all just were gone? What do you think we're risking by losing a species like that?
I do feel like the most important thing is that we would lose something that's uniquely ours. This is our species. This is where it lives. And if we can't save this species, where we have its habitat, we're one of the richest countries in the world, then I think that we have to be able to do that. To have hope for so many other endangered species out there, we have to be able to save this one. But the marmots do play an important role in their ecosystem. Those high altitude ecosystems are incredibly harsh environments. And we watch a lot of other species use marmot burrows and marmot modified landscapes for their own benefit. So when we're monitoring marmots, we'll see western toads in their burrows. Western toads are also a species at risk. We'll see garter snakes in their burrows. We see a lot of pollinators going through various stages of development in those burrows. And those pollinators, of course, are vital to those alpine wildflower meadows. We know from other species of marmots that marmots play an important role in turning over soil in these really harsh environments. There needs to be that soil turnover to get nutrients available for the plants that are growing there. So marmots play a really important role doing that as well. So as we lose our marmots, we lose some of that vibrancy that occurs in those really special ecosystems.
You see such a delicate balance in so many other species, and you say the pollinators, and you say, wow, pollinators are under stress right now. Honeybees and dying worldwide, and at some point, the tipping point is maybe we're going to go extinct if we don't pay enough attention to what's happening around us. Now, the Vancouver Island marmot is specific to Vancouver Island.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't live on Hornby Island or any of the outlying?
It doesn't live on any of the other islands. None of them are tall enough. Even those big cliffs up on Salt Spring, Mount Maxwell, no. We need subalpine, and the only spot that's got subalpine on these islands is Vancouver Island.
Okay, so we got about 4 minutes left, and then we should have covered some other questions, but let's just get into the future. Like, do you think that the climate change is going to put more pressure on the marmots, or do you think that warmer climates might actually be better for them?
We know that climate change is already having an impact
Yeah.
on marmot habitat. And it's really important to understand that we're seeing impacts from climate change happening a lot faster at higher elevation than we are at our sea level elevation.
Okay.
So we're already seeing trees beginning to creep into marmot habitat. And we just talked about why, those trees can end
Yeah.
up attracting or providing an opportunity for predators to eat marmots.
Yeah.
So we know that climate change is going to have an impact. Our hope is, and we've looked at a lot of models, over time, as we lose marmot habitat in the south, we should actually get new marmot habitat in the north.
Yeah.
So some of those areas like Mount Cain, Shown Lake Provincial Park,
Yeah.
they weren't marmot habitat. They may become marmot habitat in
Yeah.
the future. But we need to make sure there's still marmots around if we're going to have any hope
that.
for them to get.
Do they rely on snowpack? Is that they hibernate?
They hibernate for 7 months of the year. So they actually hibernate for longer than they're awake. And their entire life cycle is built around this cycle. So they feed frantically. Fortunately, they will eat anything that's green. They are herbivores, so
Yeah.
strict vegetarians. But they'll eat, pretty much. People ask what their favorite plant is, and we have a list of their favorite plants. It runs for 2 pages. They'll eat tree bark if there's nothing else available. So they'll eat and eat and eat, put on a massive amount of body weight, and then they'll use that body weight up during hibernation. They use their body weight up mostly at the very end of hibernation. Marmots are true hibernators. These aren't like bears.
Yeah.
When a marmot goes into hibernation, its pulse rate slows down to about 4 beats per minute. Its stomach and intestines just kind of wither. It is totally comatose. For the captive bred marmots or marmots that are in
Yeah.
captivity, you can pick them up and carry them, weigh them, examine their body condition, put them back, and they won't stir a wink.
What about their body temperature? Does it go down?
It does, yeah. It falls down to about 4 degrees to 6 degrees Celsius. So they get very, very cold.
That is remarkable. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then, they emerge. And so they're emerging from hibernation is a massive stress on their body. And they actually use up 80% of their stored energy. Isn't used up during hibernation. It's used waking up from hibernation.
Wow.
And that is a really difficult time for marmots. And we've
Yeah.
actually watched marmots, unfortunately, starve to death as they come out of hibernation. Even though there's food literally right in front of them, they don't have enough stored energy to get their digestive system working. So they'll starve to death with food in their belly. They have no way to digest it yet. So
That is
they need to
remarkable.
get that energy in the fall. And
Yeah.
again, because of that incredibly difficult hibernation, marmots will only breed once every other year.
Yeah.
Hibernation takes its toll. Caring for babies takes a toll. You double that up, and the stresses on a female marmot's body
Now,
are
with
horrific.
the young marmots, do you call them pups or?
We do, pups,
How,
yeah.
how many would a female have in
Typically
the year?
3 or 4. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
In a year, they'll have 3 or 4 once every other year.
Every other
they
year.
They can't breed every year
Okay.
in the wild, typically.
That is, to me, such a delicate thing.
Yeah, they're not, they are a rodent. So sometimes people think,
Yeah.
we're dealing with, animals
Yeah.
like rabbits. But man, these guys do not breed like rabbits.
We're gonna have to have you back, Alan, because we can't go through all this. But I just want to remind the viewers that you can donate to the foundation. It's such a good place to put your money, and if we can say, hey, our generation save the marmots. We might have made a lot of mistakes, but at least we saved the marmots.
And for me, I am incredibly grateful for the people who have donated.
Yeah,
To be able to work, to have the marmot here today, to be able to work on it,
yeah,
we don't realize that we have lost species on Vancouver Island. So the fact that people have stepped up has saved this species to date, and I am just so grateful that they're here to save and that I get an opportunity to work with them.
Okay, on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Walter.
So that wraps up this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back to Citizens Forum, and this is the Walt and Jack segment of the program in which we discuss the current events that are happening here and abroad. So, Jack, what did you bring in today that we should talk about?
Okay, I'm going to start off with an advertisement.
Okay.
We're doing an independent kind of news show, just like CBC or CTV or CNN, except we tell the truth from a
That's
different
quite a big
perspective.
difference.
We tell things from a different perspective. But it's done like a news show.
Yeah.
And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you will be able to see a link or something that will bring you to it if you're interested. So give it a watch if you want. So here we go, 9/11. 9/11
Okay.
almost came and went.
Yes.
16 years now? 16 years these mass murderers, and I mean the
Yeah.
people who run the United States, have gotten away with it completely 100%.
Yeah, pretty well. I mean, I think there's always consciousness being raised, Jack, and
agree.
maybe we're going to be part of helping that out. But there was such a, as you had in your last guest here, the rationale and the you have to have the reason to go to war, and 9/11 seemed to just say, well, go ahead, United States, pretty well attack anybody you want because there seemed to be a terrorist everywhere to be fought.
Even though half the people in New York City do not believe the official story. But it doesn't
Yeah.
matter because that fact is kept completely secret, and that's the media's job. The media's role in all of this is paramount. There had to be the agreement before 9/11 ever happened that the media would never ask a question about any of it. Even though there's about 2,000 architects and engineers in a group called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's called. Who say it's impossible for the buildings to have fallen the way the official story says.
Yeah.
And yet it never gets a mention. 2,000 architects and engineers say it's impossible. 9/11, the official story is impossible, but it doesn't matter. And I heard CFAX, I guess on 9/11, Monday,
Yeah.
because today is the 13th. So the guy on CFAX, the host, told the official story exactly as if there was no possible question anywhere to be raised. He just told it, and that's the power. And I don't fault him. It's being done everywhere, every town, every city, CNN, CBC, CTV, all of them. It's all a lie. I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, you think it's pretty remarkable. How could that really happen, Jack? How could they really lie to that level, and how could they convince enough people that this is what really happened? But I'm a little bit of a history buff. I suppose everybody is, and I like to read about prehistory. What happened 10,000, 15, 20,000 years ago? And what happens is during the Dark Ages, the so-called Dark Ages, say between say 500 AD and say around the time of the Renaissance, which is, everybody must know the dates, around 1700
I
or
don't,
something.
but I'm sure everybody else
What
does.
happened there?
Yeah.
Why was this the Dark Ages? Well, one of the big reasons is that the media was controlled by one group. It was called the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church, they were the scholars. They wrote and rewrote history. They shaped what people learned, and it took 1,000 years, 1,500 years for people to shake off that yoke of oppression and to start to, find new expression and enlightenment. So you never know, Jack. It might be starting today. We might have a new era of enlightenment that if enough people just say, no, we're not going to buy this nonsense. It's completely ridiculous. You have to be pretty well out of your head to believe what the official story is saying because it's so contradictory.
But I don't fault people who do believe it because I believed it. Our previous guest fought in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
I was a total believer in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
I bought the whole pack of lies, 100%.
Yeah, I think, I don't know where I became more of a skeptic, but once I really saw that there is this ability to lie, or shouldn't say lie, to shape the news and to shape
Well, they lie. Let's
shape
call it what it
education
is.
and all that. And if you look at the Catholic Church, this is fair game, because if you actually look at the history now, looking back, you realize they did suppress information. They were very good at it. Oh, by the way, if you didn't agree with their version of history, you became a heretic, and they just burnt you at the stake. So anybody that actually tried to make changes wouldn't do too well during the Inquisition and all that. So, but I think once I became aware of one case where you say, okay, they can really control information that well. Now it's just all technology. What are we looking at? We're looking at, looking at television, internet, and we're looking at newspapers and all that. It's a pretty small group of people who are controlling all those mediums. And so it wouldn't be that hard to actually shape a story like 9/11 and keep it going for 16 years. And enough people are going to buy in that will give them some kind of legitimacy. And I think that's what's happening.
Which leads us into our next story, because in the next story, it's exactly the same thing. The whole thing is a lie, and we're in really big trouble.
Yeah.
9/11 has caused a lot of trouble. War, murder
Yeah.
of millions of innocent people, Bill C-51,
Yeah.
all of it. But the next story is climate change.
Yeah.
And the lie they fed us there was that there's no such thing as climate change. I mean, for probably for hundreds of years. But Al Gore
Yeah.
said he was studying in university in the 60s or late 50s or 60s about climate change. So it wasn't unheard of, and yet it was completely covered up in the media. They spent, no doubt, hundreds of millions of dollars to manipulate, misinform, create diversion away from CFAX. My number one radio station here in Victoria, for many, 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 many years, the number one guest they ever had on climate change was Tim Ball, Dr. Tim Ball, who was a climate change denier. He got more time than all the other 99% or 97% of scientists who say, yes, climate change is going to happen. It's real. It's happening. CFAX chose, because they're totally corrupt, I think, to give Dr. Tim Ball more time than all of them put together. So here we are.
Seemingly. No, hurricanes, climate change. Let's face it. You see those hurricanes building up out in the Atlantic. You have 2 or 3 in a row. And the Irma was, when they showed satellite pictures of Hurricane Irma, the eye of the hurricane was 25 kilometers wide. Like, hurricanes are 25 kilometers wide. They used to be. Now the eye of the hurricane is 25 kilometers.
Yeah.
And the hurricane, when it showed over Florida, it lapped over everything. There's no one escaping. And now Florida, in the last couple of days, maybe I'm not following the news closely enough, but today was just shocking, the things I saw. And all the Everglades, all the very southern tip of Florida is so low lying. It's destroyed, and including out in the Caribbean, Cuba, and
It was super destroyed out there.
oh yeah, those small islands are just wiped out. But there seems to be, they're covering it in a way. I mean, it's sort of an unrealness to it. There's no gravity to it, and I think one of the things I'm concerned about is that there's no perspective to it. That we're not really talking about. Yeah, this is what happens when climate change arrives.
Not
folks.
one word. Not one.
There is there's a
little
word on occasion, but it doesn't seem to be real. It just seems, these storms are happening now, and we're gonna have to up our building code, but there doesn't seem to be any real reason for them to having,
Yeah. So I agree with that 100%. So what we've watched over the last month, and really it's longer. I mean, Saskatchewan just had the driest summer on record. That doesn't even get a mention.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia is flooding.
We just broke records in Victoria for the longest rainless season, and if you take out the couple of days we had showers, we're talking like 4 months without rain. So I mean, it's scary. If you look at the trees, go into the forests, look at the plant life and everything. Leaves are shedding. Trees are shedding leaves now because prematurely, because there's just no energy left in the tree, and over time, a lot of trees are going to die. So there's some serious issues, and of course, if they don't die, they're going to burn. Up in the interior, we have this smoky weather, and it's so ominous to see that orange globe in the sky during the day, and it's telling us something. If this new progressive NDP Green Coalition, they can go ahead and do whatever they want to help reverse climate change. They get complete support. I think most people in British Columbia, when they start looking at pipeline issues, to keep pumping this stuff out of the ground, and looking at the fracking and the whole joke of the natural gas and stuff they were supposed to be producing. Thank God the economy fell out of that, because now we have a chance to reset a little bit, maybe get rid of those mega projects, get rid of Site C Dam. We don't need it.
Stop all old growth logging.
Government doesn't have to do a lot of
immediately.
convincing here. We see it every day. So I hope they take heart. I hope they move ahead in a lot of ways.
Well, you're right, and it just occurred to me as you said it that we are in a absolute crisis on climate change, and many other crises as well, the economy but I haven't heard a real urgency from this government, the NDP Green government, saying this is a crisis, we've got to act immediately. That's not being said by them either.
Yeah.
Or by anybody else.
Well, British Columbia is like, we have the interior of British Columbia and all those communities that are dependent upon resource extraction, lumber, which is now being burnt up, and also oil and gas, which is so cyclical. And these people have been beat up, Jack. If you live in Williams Lake or in Prince George and up through the interior, you don't know how can you plan for your future? Because if we just were full on into the extraction part of the economy and not building up diversified manufacturing and create economies within the region that actually function, that you don't have to just get rid of all your resources, hope somebody will give you something for them, and that's how you're going to survive.
And that's the way our country is run. So of
Yeah.
course the people in any resource community, and then they're targeted against us and we're targeted against them, but we always don't see the real enemy, which is the corporation that runs the show.
Well,
and runs
the
world.
economy is supposed to be flourishing right now, but it's only flourishing in the Lower Mainland. Well, if you read the papers, I
And
guess.
it's only flourishing in house prices.
Yeah, and it's all artificial.
And that's the free trade deals.
Yeah.
If we didn't have these free trade deals, the people in Williams Lake could be building, let's say, refrigerators for the whole country, right? And the people in small communities everywhere
Yeah.
could be building the manufactured things that we need. But that's not allowed to happen because that's not how the rulers of the world want our country to be.
Yeah.
Instead, we're resource extraction, and resources are basically gone. Mining now is so poisonous. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And they've just got us.
Well, these things can change too, and it's out of necessity now. I mean, if the NDP wants support and the Greens want support, they're going to have to start bringing forward programs to support these communities, and people will understand. Hey, sustainability is good. Sustainability is good for the environment. It's good for our lives and our health. It's good for the economy. It's not some airy-fairy thing that somebody's been dreaming up. It's the only way to go in the end. We can't rely on just shipping out everything that's of any value in this province and shipping it overseas. It just doesn't work. Not for us. Of course, it'll work for a few people, and a few people will get rich. On that happy note, Jack, we're going to wrap up this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back. In this segment, I am going to interview Walt, but first I'd like to thank the volunteer crew and Shaw staff who so well do this program with us every 2 weeks. So Walt, we're going to start off talking about TELUS.
Well, you heard my story. In the
Well,
last,
just repeat, give us
last,
the 1 minute.
TELUS decided they're going to put fiber optic cable on my road, Durant's Road in Saanich. After a few inquiries, I found out it was all part of a wireless system that they're using the fiber optic cable to support basically a series of cell phone towers, but they're now putting these cell phone transmitter type devices right on the telephone and hydro poles right in our neighborhoods. So I gleaned a little bit of information from them of trying to figure out exactly what they were planning, but it was very hard to find out. But in the end, after a few emails and our trusty researcher, Norm sent me an email the other day and kind of outlined what was really happening in my area. And what it basically boils down to is that Brentwood Bay is sort of a test area for TELUS. They're putting in over 100 transmitter receivers in the Brentwood Bay
area.
In the town site. Pretty well blanketing all of Brentwood Bay with a new level of microwave radiation.
Brentwood Bay?
Brentwood Bay, yeah. The TELUS representative that came to the doorstep said that they were spending $500 million in Saanich alone.
No.
Yeah, this is what I was told. I didn't. He asked me not to quote him, but this is what he told me. But there's a lot of money being spent. Oh, by the way, Sunday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, guess who was on our road? Was the installers for fiber optic cable, and we got the fiber optic cable installed in our road on Sunday. So it happens just that fast, I guess.
But you're not in Brentwood Bay. You're something different.
Yeah.
But Brentwood Bay they're already doing the wireless thing as well.
That's right. They're getting the fiber optic cable in, and then they're going to be going with the wireless transmitters. And Industry Canada shows over 100 transmitters to go in Brentwood Bay.
Now you sent me a letter that you got from TELUS, and what they said was, "Oh, this is so little power. You won't even notice it. It's safer than green tea." Well, they didn't say that, but
this is so interesting, and this is a propaganda ploy, if nothing else, by TELUS, because they'll say the transmitters are around 5 watts.
Yeah.
Now, 5 watts. Think about it, 5-watt Christmas tree light is 5 watts. An LED light bulb.
It is safer than green tea.
5 or 7 watts, but that's at 60 cycles per second. Now, if you do the math and you actually figure out how much energy has been delivered, it's much greater, because the frequency in which that 5 watts is being delivered is at around 2.2 gigahertz, with its 2.2 billion cycles per second, and that's a heck of a lot of energy being beamed at your house by TELUS.
So I've never heard this. So
Yeah.
say that again. When a 5-watt Christmas light.
Well, we all have an impression of 5 watts is
it's
very low
it's
power.
nothing.
But the thing is, in the radio frequency radiation world, 5 watts is a pretty good punch of energy that they're sending out from these transmitters. They have the capability of transmitting up to 5 watts. And when you're up into the frequencies up in the billions of cycles a second, which we're now into, that's a very powerful form of energy.
So it's just, my goodness, I'd never really heard
But
that.
they're talking about the 5 watts. So people say, oh, well, can't be
5
that
watts.
bad. What could 5 watts do? Well, 5 watts can penetrate your body as well as the body of your loved ones and your pets and all your neighbors. It's an energy level that would be, you start talking about the levels, and it sounds so peculiar because it's like in the quadrillions. I mean, the level of energy you're being exposed to as opposed to the natural environment is hundreds and hundreds of billions of times higher. we've evolved in a natural environment that has radiation. Of course, we are part of the universe, and we have evolved as a species because of radiation from space and from the sun, and our body welcomes in this type of lots of types of radiation to be healthy. Well, when man came along and started to build all these transmitters with all these frequencies, the body doesn't know that this is bad stuff, and it welcomes in this radiation, and it's one of the worst things that could possibly happen to us because we don't have any natural defenses to it. So it's a very serious situation.
It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And as we all put our cell phones to our head, that kind of power is going right through our head, right?
I often tell people to look at the Bioinitiative report and really seriously consider what they're saying. There's 3,500 studies in that report now showing it's very serious biological effects associated with exposure at this level. It's just that our government doesn't agree with it, and the industry doesn't agree with it, and the media is spinning it all around and around and saying this is not enough evidence. But you can't change biology. We are being burdened down with this type of energy in our environments, and it's breaking our health down. There's no doubt about it.
Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Jack.
Ay, ay, ay. So, thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome back to the last segment for Citizens Forum for this week. And we're just going to talk a little bit about what Jack is calling a democratic revolution. And what do you think that democratic revolution might look like, Jack?
I'm glad you asked, Walt. Well, just following up from what you've said about the issue of what TELUS is doing to people who may not want it done to them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think if everybody was sent a letter outlining what you've just said about the amount of power that is being beamed into their homes, strictly within the law, because the government says this is okay as long as you're not cooking. Is that right? As long as you're not cooking in Canada, they can do whatever they want to you. So, and GMOs are exactly the same, So what we need is a democratic revolution, I think. And I think what it has to look like is we have to take power away from the politicians. The politicians, I don't think we elect them to do what they want, because it's come to the point of where what they want is to further their own political careers, because it's a very, very nice job.
Yeah.
And so they are quite willing to sell us out and betray us 365 days a year at the federal level, at the provincial level, and at the municipal level, in order to further their careers. And I don't fault them.
Well,
because if they
I'm
don't
differ
do
a
it,
little
okay,
bit.
but just let me finish. I don't fault them, because if they say, no, I don't want to do that, they'll be shunted aside, and somebody else will be brought in, and we'll never hear about it, and things will continue as they do.
Yeah. No, and it's true. I mean, I guess you've sort of just, clarified that situation. But, Rick Hapgood said a few weeks ago, we was talking about, I think, the Site C Dam. Had we had proportional representation, was it Site C that he was talking about? It just wouldn't be on the table.
Yeah.
They wouldn't consider it because
they wouldn't be able to do it.
It's just ludicrous.
Because PR is a more democratic
That's
system.
right.
It gives us a little
And
more
Site C
power.
Dam was a really terrible idea. It was bad for the environment. It's devastating for the economy. It's supporting the petroleum industry fundamentally, and it's saddling us with huge debt. Province of British Columbia will never probably be able to pay itself, get itself out of this debt. But the thing is about democracy, and you know how frustrated you have been, and I've gone to see my MLA and MPs around the issue of the public exposure to radio frequency radiation and issues around that. And one MLA really sat there, her eyes were wide open, and just didn't know what to say or do about it. It just seemed so strange. I just seemed like such a strange person to be bringing this all up. And then another member of Parliament, when I met with him, he all of a sudden became a huge expert in the area, and seemed to know so much about it, what the industry had told him. You see, and really, in some ways, I think maybe he believed that. I'm not sure.
Well, let's put it this way. He has to believe it, because if he doesn't believe it,
Yeah.
if you dare to speak out on the important issues,
Yeah.
your career will be over.
But who ends that career? And that to me is what is important for us to know, that government is, we have elected officials that come and go, and more or less in most cases are window dressing for the agenda. But the deputy ministers, who are generally there as representatives of the corporate world, those are the guys that are calling the shots, and also the bureaucracy that they represent. For instance, for say the chief medical health officer in his office and all the things they're looking at, it isn't that he's mistaken about this issue, in my view. My view is that he would not have his job if he did not toe this line, a line that's not scientific. It's simply
Because
not,
he says it's safe. He says
this type of radiation is safe. Anybody who's looked into it would know that simply isn't scientific.
And I don't find fault with any of these people.
Yeah.
Because, like all of us, they're just actors and actresses. They're players in the game.
Yeah.
And the game is controlled from on high.
Yeah.
And if you don't do, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you'll just be pushed aside one way or another, gently or not so gently.
Yeah.
And somebody else will be brought in. So, and I'm not saying they're not good people. They're all
Jack,
wonderful
I was
people.
watching PBS the other night, and they had a show on
You've
about
got to change
about
the
René
game.
Lévesque. And they looked at René Lévesque back in the 70s, and he was head of the Parti Québécois, and he wanted to separate Quebec, ran a referendum to separate Quebec from Canada and all that. I'm looking at René Lévesque, and I think he's one of the best politicians. One of the best things we have going for us as Canadians is a guy like René Lévesque. And he wanted to get out of Canada. But the thing is that we can have people that with real honesty and integrity and willing to really work hard, and they can really make changes. So I don't believe in giving up on the political system, because it's the only game we got going for us. We got to stay engaged in it.
Yes. I'm just saying that we have to democratize the political system so it begins to listen to the people of the country, not listen to me.
Yeah.
But create a democratic system where you inform people
Yeah.
of the important issues, you find out what they want, and that's the government's job, to do
Yeah.
what the people want, not do what the 1% of the 1% want,
Yeah.
because that's where we're at now.
But, just to wrap up, we're in this very critical time in British Columbia, historic time when we can change the way we elect our government in British Columbia. It's precarious times. This could go off the rails in so many different ways. I'm just telling everyone to get on board here and force this government to bring in proportional representation, and we will have done something very good.
Which is something the media is absolutely not talking about.
This is true. So that wraps up the show for this week, and thank you for watching.